All of the early enrollees, Ole Miss Rebels, have made it to campus, but a couple of guys couldn't quite do it. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We'll explain.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media at Yahoo Sports. Thank you very much for joining me this Tuesday morning. Today on the show, we're going to talk about the Ole Miss early enrollee situation and the players. They're in classes getting ready for spring football, but there are a couple of issues that could open the door for some other players. Also, Akylin Dear has been a crystal ball to Ole Miss. I talk about why he is such an important recruit to this 2025 Ole Miss recruiting class. And the Rebels face South Carolina in basketball tonight. We talk all about that. But this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Really exciting time. We're probably about 5 or 6 weeks away from spring practice. We're going to start ramping up to that. Ole Miss announced Friday it's in early enrollees that has gotten in. And they had a nice little haul of early enrollees that made it in. This is from the Rebel Walk. The latest D1 transfers that are enrolled in school, in class right now is Trey Amos, Yam Banks, Julius Bulow, Logan Diggs, Nate Kalepo, Key Lawrence, Lewis Moore, Walter Nolen, Chris Paul, Diego Pounds, Devin Prince, Jerquan Scott, Brandon Turnage, Princely Umanmielen, Memoriam Walker, Antoine Wells, and of course, there's 12 December high school signees. That is Travarius Banks, player that we saw at the Under Armour All-American game, Cedric Beavers, who has a chance to be counted on pretty heavily at cornerback this year, Cam Clarkson, Raymond Collins, same situation at linebacker, Jude Foster, Cam Franklin, Dylan Hipp, Andy Jaffe, AJ Maddox, Anthony Robinson, who actually was committed from Louisiana, made it to Oxford. We talked about how that works from time to time. Jeffrey Rush, Noreel White, and along with a couple of walk-ons as well. Those are some early enrollees that have made it to campus. And you may have noticed there's no Marquis Willis. There's no Deion Smith on that list. Neither one of those wide receivers were able to make it to Oxford. Through various, they were trying to graduate essentially early because that is what was going to be required to get both of them into school. Now, both of them are kind of going through different things, but this, in the end of the day, might not be the most horrible thing for Ole Miss moving forward, because there's a couple of players that are going to have opportunities this spring because of situations that have happened at the wide receiver position. And even the fact that Logan Diggs is injured, that's probably a big situation for Kedrick Riscano. But let's start with Deion Smith. And whenever he went in, he got into a little bit of trouble academically at LSU and tried to transfer, could not do it. Ended up going to East Mississippi Community College and then eventually to Holmes Community College. And those transfers and the credits, it was always going to be hard to get him in. The fact that he was even trying and it was as close as it was for an early enrollee is actually a credit to the kid for getting his grades up to the point where it was almost where it needed to be. He's got one semester to get through, graduate from junior college, and he'll end up in Oxford in May. That's the plan. And I think it's probably 1 or 2 courses all that he has to pass to get going. He's going to be at Ole Miss. This isn't a situation to where we're waiting at the end of July to see if some JUCO kids have the grades to get into school. This isn't a Jarrell Poe type situation we're going through here. Deion Smith, the fact that there was even a chance that he could get in January, means that he's going to get in May. Deion Smith is going to have to make it through maybe a full summer term, maybe a first summer, maybe a second summer. I do not know exactly how they're going to break that down. He's going to get into fall. He's probably going to go to school. He needs to do whatever he can to be eligible for the spring semester. But I imagine after this football season, Deion Smith is going to be out of pocket and gone. I think there's a good chance that he is a one and done. But this has opened up windows for other players. Deion Smith and Marquis Willis not making it to campus is an opening for Nareel White, who came early, for Caden Lee, who came early, for Ayden Williams. All of those players have a chance to make a major jump during the spring session whenever competition, the numbers might not totally be there. Now, like I said, this isn't a situation where you're worried about these kids getting there. If they were in conversation to be here in January, they'd have to completely fall off a cliff not to be here in May. And even then, you still have time to get them on campus. And they play the wide receiver position, which if you're willing to block and you're a gifted athlete, you can pick up exactly what's going on, especially in this offense where the receivers do not change sides of the field very often. But I fully expect Deion Smith and Marquis Willis to be here by the fall. I also expect Ayden Williams, Caden Lee, those guys to be better football players in the fall because they're not here. I also kind of expect Juice Wells to be the number 2 wide receiver. We were expecting Deion Smith whenever we were all assuming he was going to be here in January. Now, Juice Wells has the opportunity to get those 15 practices of a leg up over Deion Smith and Marquis Willis and those guys. So the offense is going to look fine. It's going to be explosive. All of the stuff that we've said about it, it's still going to happen. It just might look a little bit different than we were originally planning on it. Now, the other thing, and these are early enrollees, is the running back, Logan Diggs, arrived at school, but he has I think a torn ACL at the moment. This is going to be a major, massive spring training for Kedrick Riscano. It is set up for him to get all the carries in the world. It is set up for him completely to show out. I realize that like Matt Jones and Ulysses Bentley and all those guys are here too. But the biggest spring out of all the players that have like the biggest spring potential, they're kind of class of 2023 guys. And it's the Kedrick Riscano. It is Jamarius Brown. It is Santarin Perkins. It is Ayden Williams. Those 4 players have a chance to have a truly impact spring and to position themselves up higher when you're competing with these guys right now that are transfers. More are going to be adding on to it in the spring or in the fall, and you can see exactly how that works. I think that Kedrick Riscano has a chance to have a massive, massive, massive spring. It's huge for him. I don't know exactly, with Logan Diggs, I've said all along that I thought he was somebody that they brought in for the playoffs. Somebody that by the Georgia game starts getting some carries and start getting some work. And by the first round of the playoff, he becomes an extra depth piece that you can use that is not going to blow a red shirt because of the number of games played and things like that. But Ole Miss has Ulysses Bentley, who has a chance to be one of the most explosive backs since John Avery, if we're going to be honest, in Ole Miss history. But Ole Miss needs that guy that can kind of tote the mail a little bit. You're not going to be the explosive play. You need somebody that can be the consistent play. And I think that is where Kedrick Riscano comes in as well. Really good running back. Really good chance to be an extremely effective back in Ole Miss's system. He just has to do it. We have to see it. And then honestly, the first time we're going to get to see it is in the spring game. So we'll have an idea of exactly what he does there. If you look at my shirt, little hoop in the sip shirt, I got it from College Corner in Oxford, Mississippi. As everybody knows, I do not live in the state of Mississippi, and they're not paying me a dime for this. But I ordered this on Friday. I'm wearing this on Monday. In 3 days, that was shipped, and they got it from Oxford, Mississippi, down here to Winter Haven, Florida. And they do this consistently. And this is the reason I get all of my Ole Miss gear from the College Corner, because of the customer service and the level of service that they provide. I just wanted to show it out, wanted to talk about it. They got it here in 3 days. Thank you very much for that, Scott and the gang up there. So we have a lot of stuff to get to today. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day, and we're just getting started. Ole Miss football got crystal balled for Akylin Dear, and we talk about this prospect and a loaded Mississippi class for 2025 up next. Happy Super Bowl Sunday to all that celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. I realize that it's Tuesday, but if you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. You know, the Saints, I guess that was in 2009. That's been a minute, but that's the only time the Super Bowl has actually meant something to me as a game. I like all the ambiance, all the extra stuff. I'm going to watch the NFL Today documentary with Brent Musburger leading up to the game. I'm going to look at all the graphics packages and try and figure out what I can take from what they're interviewing for this show. But if you're not interested in the win the game, there still is an opportunity for you to win 1, 2, maybe even 3 times, grabbing that W for the day. Not only can you bet on who the Super Bowl 58 they'll win that game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score the first touchdown, how many points will be scored, what the coin flip will look out, the color, the Gatorade, all of that stuff can be bet on as well. And new customers can join today and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/locked on to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel. It's an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, so we talked about the early enrollees, and there's a little bit of a hiccup, but it also could be an opportunity for some young guys moving forward into the fall this year. Now, up next, we're going to move to the 2025 recruiting class, and Ole Miss got crystal balled by David Johnson from 24/7 with a commitment potentially from Akylin Dear. Now, those crystal balls can pop in at any time. You don't know when a commitment's going to come, but Dear is a very, very important player in the state of Mississippi, not just because he's a running back, and running backs in Mississippi, in the top 10 in Mississippi, they haven't been going to in-state schools. Ole Miss has lost Chris Davis, lost Dante Dowdle. They lost, I don't know if you go back a little bit, every running back that comes through Mississippi goes out of state. I think Branson Robinson from Germantown went to Georgia. There's been one every year, but they've all gotten out of state. Akylin Dear is predicted to go to Ole Miss. If you look at the RPM, the recruiting prediction machine from On3, Ole Miss is like 60% to land a signature from Akylin Dear at the moment. And if you look at the rankings overall, the consensus, they have him at 148 on the On3 consensus. You have consensus 4-star player. Everybody has him at least in the top 171. And somebody has them, I think that's ESPN, as high as 58. It's as a consensus, pretty much a top 10 running back, a really good player. Now, if you look at the 24/7, the composite has him at 105 as the top 10 running back in the country, number 4 player in the state of Mississippi. A really good football player. And if you look at his highlights, first of all, you noticed he is a running back that looks a lot lighter than his weight. This is a 200-pound back that is doing some stuff that's really impressive. His lateral movement is fantastic. Multiple times when you see him bust through the line, he cuts at full speed, just slightly right or left, reminiscent of Quinshawn, if we're going to be honest, but with more top end level speed. And if you look, it's just touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. He has good hands. He's good in the receiving game. He's an all around running back and has a chance to be a really big player. This is a very, very important player for Ole Miss in the 2025 recruiting class. He was at Ole Miss's junior day this past weekend, and by all accounts, if you look on social media, he had a good time, which everybody has a good time on these visits. That's what they're supposed to be. So you'll see Akylin Dear and become a focal point of this staff and inside the state of Mississippi, even though he is not the number one player. This 2025 Mississippi recruiting class is loaded. If you look at this overall, these are the top 5 players. You have Caleb Cunningham, Deuce Knight, Andrew Maddox, Tyler Miller, and Akylin Dear. That's the top 5. If you look over, Ole Miss is in the lead for 3 of them. I would not count them out with Deuce Knight. It's one of those situations. If he was committed to Ole Miss, I would not count the eggs before they hatch with him being committed to Ole Miss as well. But I think that Ole Miss is going to consistently recruit this player. This is a guy that Brian Smith, the Locked On recruiting analyst, absolutely loves. He's nearly 6'5". He has like a 45-inch vertical jump. He is a freak of an athlete. Southpaw. We'll see exactly how that goes. Caleb Cunningham may be the best player in college football, okay, or in high school football. He is the number 13 player or something like that, number 12 player in the country. Mississippi State is beyond all in on Caleb Cunningham. Beyond. He's from the Starkville area. They are going to try and press him as hard as they can. If you look at this list, you can see why. Mississippi State does not have the most healthy NIL setup at the moment. They're trying to get there, but as it is, they're going to have to go all in from time to time on players. They are trying to get this Caleb Cunningham just for the PR win of what he could mean as well. If you look at the second half of the top 10, again, it's all Ole Miss type players. You have Cortez Thomas, another player that Brian Smith absolutely loves. Reginald Vaughn, Jacoby Hobson from Lake Cormorant is on the list as well. Cameron Franklin has committed to Ole Miss from last year's class. Jacoby has spent a ton of time in Oxford because of that. Ole Miss has a very much an advantage there. Kevin Otis as well. Looks like an Ole Miss LSU type battle. And Michael Jones from Madison Central. Madison Central is a good spot for Ole Miss in the state. But if you look at it, the reason I brought those up, you see that recruiting in 25 looks a whole lot like it did in 24. If you look at the way the 2025 class is starting, it's starting really similar to what it did in 2024 with the Camarion Franklin and all that. And Ole Miss just dominated the in-state recruiting in that situation. I'm not saying that Ole Miss is going to do it, but when you look at these kids getting ready to be recruited, and Ole Miss is going through all of the hype that they're going to receive all the way through the college football playoff in December, that's roughly the same time as signing day. There's a chance that Ole Miss can parlay all of this hype into a really good recruiting class. Like I said, Ole Miss is going to try for Caleb Cunningham. I do think that Mississippi State is going completely all in on that player. They're at least trying to get a number one player in the country. They're trying to change the narrative. If nothing else, it's a PR thing. If they get number one and Ole Miss gets 5 or 6 of the top 10 again, they can at least play that card as well. Now, Deuce Knight, like I said, Ole Miss is going to recruit him and stay on him all the way to the end just because of what he could mean. He spent a lot of time in Oxford. He Elite 11 in the Oxford Elite 11 last year. I think you have a chance to see this recruitment get interesting. It's kind of an AJ Maddox, honestly, type recruiting that you can expect. He recruited early. He committed early to Texas A&M, but ended up going to Ole Miss as it went on. I think that Notre Dame, I mean, you're going to have to fight the Golden Dome. You're going to have to fight them essentially having NBC as their own network, which I guess now they don't really. But it's a situation where in the end, home has a chance to really weigh heavy on this kid. This kid went to Nashville. It didn't really work out. He came home. I do think there's a situation where close to home matters, and at least inside the state borders matters a little bit more. And we'll see exactly how that goes with Deuce Knight. But Akylin Dear, most important commit in the 2025 recruiting class, if Ole Miss gets it, of anybody in the state. I am dead serious about that. Really, really good football player. Still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We turn our attention to the South Carolina Gamecocks game, which is tonight, and we talk about what the Rebels have to do. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to be the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. Be part of history. Ole Miss is in Columbia, South Carolina tonight to take on the South Carolina Gamecocks, and the way it's set up right now is the second half of that game. Shark Tank Live will be going on at that moment, so join us on Shark Tank Live tonight. We'll have a little bit of a second half watch party for a game that has a chance to get weird. There's some unanswered questions, and we'll see exactly how it goes. South Carolina, they won at Tennessee. If everybody remembers the first SEC game of the season, Tennessee kind of took it to Ole Miss. They have a victory over Kentucky. Ole Miss faces Kentucky next. South Carolina is going to be a difficult game, especially in the Colonial Life Center in Columbia, South Carolina. This is also a place where weirdness happens. Even when Ole Miss has been clearly the superior team, that has been a difficult place for Ole Miss men's basketball to go play, especially, women's basketball now as well. But when you look at this situation, South Carolina, they're in that new rich category that Ole Miss is in as well. South Carolina is 18-3 right now. I think Ole Miss is 18-4 or something like that. In the last 2 weeks, South Carolina has played really well. I mean, completely gelling. Awesome. I mean, they took it to Tennessee. They beat Georgia. And they beat Kentucky. They have been really rolling. But if this was Ole Miss, if Ole Miss was doing exactly what South Carolina was, everybody here is like, this can't go on forever. This has to change. You cannot play at such a high level for such a long period of time. So maybe tonight is the game where South Carolina gets into a little bit of trouble. Maybe tonight is the game where the shots don't go in. Maybe tonight is the game where defense isn't quite where it needs to be. Because if you look at South Carolina right now, this is the year from the ESPN power rankings that I looked at. 19-3 is South Carolina. They play Ole Miss tonight. They have Vanderbilt Saturday. They have gotten through a difficult portion of their schedule. So there's a chance for a letdown. And of that, Ole Miss is the team this week that would have a chance to get them. They've won Team of the Week for ESPN 2 weeks in a row. And now they're in the power rankings in the top 15. Lamont Paris has done a fantastic job and has wins over Tennessee and Kentucky. South Carolina is 7-2 against quad 1 and quad 2. That is the third best winning percentage in quad 1 and 2 among team with 5 or more total wins in those categories. The Gamecocks efficiency-based metrics haven't quite caught up to their record, but they're fourth in adjusted efficiency margin in league games behind Auburn, Tennessee, and Alabama, which kind of seems spot on. That is from ESPN.com. The point is, South Carolina is a really good team, and they've been playing really well. And Ole Miss is going to be an absolute underdog playing a road game in the Colonial Life Center. But I've said all of that to say this. Ole Miss can beat this team. Ole Miss can win this game. Like I say always, there's a difference between can, should, and will. But Ole Miss can win this game. And that is going to take a little bit of South Carolina regressing a little bit and coming back. It's going to be Ole Miss making some shots because Ole Miss only wins when Juju Murray and Matthew Morrell are shooting the ball really well. If those two things happen, South Carolina regresses a little bit. You can find yourself in a little bit of a dogfight, and it can look a little bit like the Texas A&M game did just a week ago. It should be interesting. It's not a game that I'm counting on Ole Miss to win. In fact, I'm counting Ole Miss probably to lose this game. I'm counting on them to lose the game against Kentucky, and then it's time to get back to where you can win because, like I've said, all season long, the goal this season should be 9-9 in the SEC. I'm not saying you should forfeit anything and give anything up. You try to win every game. But as far as the pass-fail line for what is a successful season, I think 9 wins should be that goal. And they've played like it to this point. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. Every Dayers basketball season is in full swing, and baseball is getting ready to start as we wait on the most anticipated football season at Ole Miss, maybe ever. And you can hear about it all here. But for your second listen, check out Locked On Today. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone. Shark Tank Live tonight.